Hello, everybody. It's John Pollock, and this is your Thursday post-wrestling news update. I'm solo today for a variety of reasons, but Wei Ting will be back this week. We have done so many shows. It's my head is spinning, but here we are. I wanted to use today's show to mainly talk about the UFC 268 pay-per-view. And Wei told me, he said, John, I want to give you this. I want to give you some shine. So you handled UFC 268 and preview it. And then he told me all of his picks, and I was stunned. I was stunned at some of the ways of which he is going on Saturday night. But a few news items just to get to right before we get to UFC, which will be the lion's share of this particular news update. NXT from Tuesday night did 631,000 viewers. They finished 30th among cable originals for the night. 0.15 in the demo. Brandon Thurston noting 198,000 viewers that correlating to. This was they were down 15% in viewers and 17% in 18 to 49. Number one, it's coming off the big Halloween Havoc special. You knew it would be down. Beyond that, this was a ultra competitive night for anyone to be up against. You had the governor's races going on in New Jersey and Virginia. So cable news was Fox News dominated the top 5 slots on cable. You had what ended up being the final game of the World Series with Game 6. And you had the NBA. So that, to me, it was a exceptionally competitive night, and one that probably was the most competitive of the night when it comes to NXT's competition on a Tuesday. So I would say, all things considered, the fact they were only down 17% in the demo was held up more than you could envision. Like their 18 to 34 audience, it fell dramatically from last week. It was down 38%. Beyond that, I don't know how much you really glean from this number. You would venture to say, well, let's see how they do in the ensuing weeks. That said, I expect NXT to kind of be at this level. I don't think Halloween Havoc was going to be this injection of new eyeballs that was going to catapult NXT's foundational number. This number very much in line with what they were doing throughout the month of October before Halloween Havoc, which skews things a bit higher. This is just the level that NXT, I think we are going to expect it to be at. Dynamite numbers will be out later today, as will the WWE third quarter earnings report that will be released at the close of business, and then they will have their call with media analysts later on in the evening. So what we'll do is that we will have a story up on the site going over the main points of the report and the call. And then on Friday, I'll be joined by Brandon Thurston of WrestleNomics and now of Post Wrestling to chat all about the minutia. All right, we're going to add plenty of color to all that comes out of today's earnings. And I would certainly send everybody over to Brandon Thurston's Twitter account or just at WrestleNomics. He always goes through a projection of the earnings calls, and there have been times that he is very accurate. And when you look at other analysts out there, I mean, Brandon is really on top of things. So check all of that stuff out, and then we will chat with Brandon on Friday. Okay, UFC 268. The other note, we did have the Zoey Stark story up on the site on Wednesday. It is a knee injury she sustained and requires surgery. So that, obviously wishing the best for Zoey Stark as she goes through that recovery process as well. But that angle was shot on Tuesday, as you saw, where she was attacked in the locker room. And really, they didn't even do anything too significant in terms of physicality. She was already on the floor with Gigi Dolan and JC Jane already there, and she's clutching the knee. So, I mean, you can see what the purpose of that angle was. So we wish a full and hopefully as fast as possible recovery for Zoey Stark. Okay, let's chat a bit about UFC 268. So, it's going to be headlined by Kamaru Usman and Colby Covington. And we're going to kind of look at some of the major stories going into this card. It's a very big show for the company. Dana White is projecting that this is going to be the 4th highest gate in the history of Madison Square Garden. So this is a big ticket event and headlined by a rematch from December of 2019. Kamaru Usman has, to me, established himself as among, if not the top fighter in the world at this stage of the game. I would say what is on the line for him on Saturday night, beyond retaining the welterweight championship, may be the accolade of Fighter of the Year. I think that we can look at several candidates. I think that the outcome of Charles Oliveira and Dustin Poirier could create an argument there. Dustin Poirier has had a great year, but I'm looking at Kamaru Usman, that when you look at the potential of 3 wins this year, defending his championship, and the fashion of which he has done it, with Gilbert Burns, the knockout of Jorge Masvidal, that was just an all-timer when it comes to a visual that will be attached to the Kamaru Usman highlight reel. But that fight back in April, and doing it in the fashion he did. I mean, remember that turnaround from Gilbert Burns to Jorge Masvidal, the rematch. That was February to April. So he has had some time to have some downtime, and now comes back to fight Colby Covington. And time off is going to be a key part of this fight. When they last fought in December of 2019, it was an excellent fight. I would say, had it not been for the year that provided that classic that we will talk about later, involving Joanna Jędrzejczyk and Zhang Weili, could have been your fight of the year. It was that competitive of a fight, and one that I don't know if people necessarily expected that type of fight from these two. But when you look at their respective styles, these are two outstanding wrestlers that did not shoot for a takedown once in that fight, and it became a 5-round stand-up affair that was certainly one where both men had key moments in the fight, including Covington. We know that Covington's conditioning is at a very peak level. Kamaru Usman is someone that has never been taken down in his entire career. So if you're Colby Covington, what do you take from that fight? Ultimately, he was stopped in the 5th round. I had Usman up in that fight going into the 5th, but it certainly would have been, I think, a bit of drama in those moments before the scorecards were read had it reached the 25-minute mark. I think most would have seen, Kamaru Usman, he had a big finish, and that's all that was required. And I didn't think it was a controversial stoppage either, despite what Covington tried to make it out to be at the time, and his critique of referee Mark Goddard, which will be interesting. I've not seen the assignments yet of who the referee will be in this fight, but that was certainly like a contentious issue on Covington's part, being very publicly critical of Mark Goddard. Now, with Covington, it is always how much of this is just strictly performance versus legitimate feelings of whether he could have continued or not. He fought a great fight against Kamaru Usman, and my biggest question is, since that fight in December of 2019, look at where Kamaru Usman is. In that time period, he has formed this relationship with Trevor Whitman, who is going to be he is going to be one of the focal features of this entire card, because he has not 1, not 2, but 3 fighters competing on the main card with Usman, with Rose Namajunas, and with Justin Gaethje. It is an incredible task that has been given to Trevor Whitman on this particular card. But we look at where Kamaru Usman is, and I do not have any reservations in saying if Kamaru Usman was at this level in December 2019, he is that much further ahead of the pack in November of 2021. For Colby Covington, we have a very limited sample size of where he has grown in that time. We have only seen him fight once, and that was against Tyron Woodley, who, with due respect to Tyron Woodley, a year ago in that fight, he was not the Tyron Woodley of even 2018. So, I mean, it was a fight that ended with a TKO due to the rib injury. So that is all we have gotten to see of Covington, and this is 14 months later from that fight. So certainly we have seen Covington. He is still in prime years of his career, but Covington's best was not enough against Kamaru Usman. How much development has happened? We could see a refined Colby Covington that has studied that tape, that sees something we don't. Is Colby Covington maybe going to press that that 100% takedown defense, feeling that it will surprise Kamaru Usman. Like neither was going for takedowns in that first fight. Do we get a repeat? I'm always interested in that when like that was a hard fight for both men. And if you're going into the second fight, I think both you can see after a fight like that, you are going to have immense respect for the other and what they can bring in the striking department. And are you ready to go through 5 more rounds of that toll that the fight is going to have versus the option of shooting for takedowns and working that way? I think for either, that's something to watch in this fight. But in the grand scheme of things, I just see Kamaru Usman as so far ahead of the pack. That's not to say this is going to be a blowout by any stretch of the imagination, but I think that you are going to need to see Colby Covington above his very best that we have seen. You go back to the Robbie Lawler fight. In that fight, consider this, everybody. 0 takedown attempts on Kamaru Usman. He shot for 20 takedowns against Robbie Lawler. Okay, so this is somebody that when he is searching for that takedown, he will be ultra aggressive. But with Kamaru Usman, that's like shooting on a brick wall. So he is going to have to find a way to navigate that brick wall if he wants to take this fight into that domain and risk Kamaru Usman working off of his back and potentially losing that position. Kamaru Usman is not someone you want to be underneath either. So it's an intriguing fight. For all you want to say about Colby Covington, and listen, the act, you can certainly say very tired, whatever you want to say. That has given him the keys to get this rematch, given his lack of activity over the past 2 years. It's a big gate, and you can certainly disagree with the way in which he has cultivated his status in the sport, the act that he has put on. But listen, the outcome has been, listen, this guy ultimately has to be a fighter at a level to sustain that, or the gimmick is rather worthless. In this, you are, like, to be objective, this is an outstanding fighter in Colby Covington. But I just see Kamaru Usman is that much greater at this juncture, but it's an intriguing fight nonetheless. Rose Namajunas and Zhang Weili. This is a rematch from April, and it was a violent knockout via head kick by Rose Namajunas as she regained the strawweight championship. Zhang Weili was critical of the stoppage. Listen, I went back and watched this fight this week. I was not protesting that finish at the time, and I certainly was not in hindsight watching this. This head kick rocked Zhang Weili, and it's what this fight to me is going to answer is the true test of what was the toll of that fight with Joanna Jędrzejczyk. You go back to March of 2020, it was the fight of the year, and everybody knew it the second that fight was over. It was whatever comes our way in the remaining 9 months of this year, it is going to be second at best to this fight. However, the combined fight time for both women since that classic has been 1 minute and 18 seconds, all for Zhang Weili in this loss to Rose Namajunas. We have not seen Joanna Jędrzejczyk since that fight. So it's still an incomplete of like a fight like that. I mean, go back to other similar classics. I immediately go to Robbie Lawler and Rory McDonald. And there is a transaction there of having a fight like that versus what you're paying on the back end of your career that it's going to affect you. Now, I'm not going to simply write off Zhang Weili based off that UFC 261 loss, but this fight, I think, will give us a clearer indication, like how much did that fight affect Zhang Weili. I am still favoring Rose Namajunas in this fight, but this is one where I think, first of all, let's focus a bit on Rose Namajunas, because this is a fight very much about her as well. She is still only 29 years of age. This is someone that has come up through Invicta at a very young age, and then getting onto the Ultimate Fighter, coming up short against Carla Esparza, but she has grown and matured into just an elite level fighter, regardless of gender, regardless of weight class. To me, I mean, even in defeat, when you go back to the Jessica Andrade loss, go watch that first round. It was maybe the finest round of Rose Namajunas' career before she was stopped by Jessica Andrade. And Since that time, I think she has further refined herself, and it kind of culminated in this Zhang Weili win back in April. Of course, Rose Namajunas having one of her crowning achievements in Madison Square Garden back in November of 2017 that generated the Thug Rose call of Daniel Cormier, part of his commentary highlight reel. So I think this could certainly be a fight that you're going to see Zhang Weili be better prepared for any kind of head kick offense. And I think this is one that we could certainly see a more drawn out fight. And that's going to provide a lot of answers, not just for us, the viewer, but for Zhang Weili, who has stated the fact that she would have been more easily accepting of that loss had it been more conclusive in her mind. Maybe not objectively to everybody else, but in her mind, if this had been a fight that had gone later or gone the 5 rounds and she could accept being the loser that night. So, yeah, this is one that I don't know if we're necessarily going to see an early stoppage. But that said, I've seen some incredible starts from Rose Namajunas in her career. She is a fast-paced fighter that has been able to vary her offense in such a way that it is very tricky to read. So this is another one. This could be a classic as well. Zhang Weili is certainly somebody that you always look in those kinds of losses of the effect it has on the loser, who has to live with that, who has to go to the gym with that in mind. It's a very what have you done for me lately type of sport. And when your last performance is that is couched in a part of your psyche for until it is exercised from your memory. And that's what Zhang Weili is going into this fight with. It's a big one on Saturday. Speaking of big ones, Michael Chandler, Justin Gaethje. Now, Errol Helwani reported this, that it is going to open up the pay-per-view. And it looks like the thinking of this was to give Trevor Whitman a break, that instead of him doing back-to-back-to-back fights, they've thrown him a bone here and given him some buffer time in between fights. So Chandler and Gaethje will open up the pay-per-view, which does make a lot of sense for the sanity of Trevor Whitman. Will this produce the next lightweight contender? That is the ultimate question going into this particular fight. On top of the fact that will this be can this fight disappoint? That is the other question. Is it even possible for this fight to disappoint? And while I feel this is jinxing things, I would say the only way this fight disappoints is Michael Chandler having some terrible karma in Madison Square Garden where he suffered that leg injury, that nerve issue against Brent Primus at the same venue back in June of 2017 that resulted in him losing his Bellator lightweight championship. I would say an injury occurring would literally be the only way this fight disappoints. I'm not expecting that, obviously not hoping for that. But getting that out of the way, back to the contender question, like that is, we have Dustin Poirier challenging Charles Oliveira next month. And to me, the contenders will be the winner of this fight, depending on how they look, which all things equal, I think there's going to be some deference to the winner of this fight based on its stock and name value that comes out of this. Islam Makhachev, that is someone, especially if you're looking at the next cycle of a lightweight championship fight and you're going back to Abu Dhabi, where, I mean, Khabib Nurmagomedov became, a staple on those cards, that Islam Makhachev could very well be viewed upon as, we go with the fresh contender, someone who is not challenged for a UFC championship in their career. And then that leaves poor Beneil Dariush, who's kind of overlooked in all of this. Understandable, but he essentially is the one that I would say has almost no chance of fighting for the title next, but obviously will probably get whoever is the odd man out of this championship sweepstakes. And it's probably going to be a while till we settle things, because we've got to get through the fight next month on December 11th. For this fight, Michael Chandler and Justin Gaethje, it's a 3-round fight. How much is that going to play an impact here? Chandler is somebody that, if he can draw Justin Gaethje into a firefight, that's increasing your odds against a Justin Gaethje, who his highlight reel will produce many clips of him just throwing caution to the wind, and that is a coin toss for Justin Gaethje. Now, in recent years, he has become very more measured. He has also become lethal with his leg kicks, and that is an area to exploit on Michael Chandler. The Justin Gaethje that we have seen mature in the UFC, to me, that won those 4 fights up until the Khabib loss, that's somebody that I think can certainly defeat Michael Chandler. Michael Chandler is someone that has great power. When you go back to the fight with Patricky Pitbull, that was a knockout of epic proportions for Michael Chandler. Since he has come into the UFC, we have the Dan Hooker fight to dissect. We have the Charles Oliveira loss to dissect. That is where Michael Chandler, at 35 years of age, this is certainly the time. Like, this is, for a lightweight, this is it. This is go time. Is Michael Chandler going to be a champion and an elite at lightweight? Certainly he is somebody that is going to, given his style, given just his marketability factor, I think that he is certainly somebody that is going to be in that mix, win or lose, this fight on Saturday. But is he going to be a championship level contender? He had the opportunity against Charles Oliveira, came up short in that one. This is very important, because you lose to Justin Gaethje, it doesn't mean you're out of the top 10, by no means. But are you out of that championship hunt? It's a very competitive field, with where you will still have the loser of Oliveira and Poirier, where Islam Makhachev is rapidly rising. This is a very competitive division, so it is must win, I would say, for both guys. They have had their opportunities at the champion. With Justin Gaethje, we have not seen him compete since the Khabib Nurmagomedov loss, which was over a year ago. So in this one, there is a part of me that is always hesitant about Justin Gaethje, and will he be so dialed in? Because honestly, these two going out and just throwing hands, I am not going to doubt that Chandler is going to land that shot, and that is hard to bet against. Chandler is the underdog in this fight. Justin Gaethje, though, if Justin Gaethje is in complete alignment and he is not overwhelmed by the stage, Madison Square Garden, a pay-per-view, all of the hype going into this fight of fans just wanting to see a war between these two, those are all X factors that can sometimes skew what is right in front of you. And what is right in front of you is a disciplined fighter under Trevor Whitman that has been able to show that discipline throughout his fights with Edson Barbosa, with Donald Cerrone, with Tony Ferguson. With Khabib Nurmagomedov, I mean, if ever there is a mulligan to disregard, not to disregard, but to there are levels to all of this, and a loss to Khabib Nurmagomedov is hardly a mark of shame. So this is a very, very difficult fight to call, but I am maybe I'm going to go with the underdog in this one and pick Michael Chandler. Shane Burgos, Billy Quarantillo will be competing at featherweight on the main card. Burgos is coming off losses to Josh Emmett as well as Edson Barbosa back in May. So to, remain up in the featherweight division, and, Burgos should be favored in this fight. Quarantillo is coming off a TKO win over Gabriel Benitez. So he is 4-1 in the UFC. This should be a very fun fight at 145 pounds. I want to pay some attention to Frankie Edgar and Marlon Vera. This is the latest referendum for Frankie Edgar. That was a frightening loss to Corey Sandhagen back in February. One of maybe the knockout of the year from Sandhagen. It's at least at minimum in the conversation. It's his third fight at bantamweight, 40 years of age. It's very hard to ever count out Frankie Edgar when you look at the fact this will be his 29th fight in the UFC, going back to 2007. It's been a remarkable career, and he is not being given any pushover in Marlon Vera. This is a speed division, and bantamweight and 40 years old, those numbers, that weight class and that number, they do not line up very well. For Frankie Edgar, I would say this is a fight that it is a must that his wrestling overtake this. This could be an extremely dull performance Not in the sense that it won't be, Frankie Edgar. I think like this will be an audience that will be very much behind Frankie Edgar. But if Frankie's going in this one to have some classic, I don't like those chances for him against Marlon Vera. What Frankie Edgar, I think, needs to do is just absolutely force his wrestling. Because if this fight if he cannot take Marlon Vera down and this becomes 3 rounds of standing, that's a tough fight for Frankie Edgar. And this is one certainly that after a devastating knockout loss like he had with Corey Sandhagen, then it becomes time. Like if you're staring at another loss here, it's Madison Square Garden. What is your future in fighting? I mean, he has had a brilliant career, one that will be talked about for years. One that honestly, he is a revered figure. I don't think he's hardly revered enough when you truly sit down and look at what this man has done, from the BJ Penn fights to the Gray Maynard fights, the multiple weight classes at which he has fought, the nail biters with Benson Henderson. I mean, the wars that this guy has had, it should be celebrated. It's very tough. It's very tough when you're looking at reinventing yourself at a lower weight class and you're staring at the age of 40. From those that have seen him, like, this is among the hardest workers you are going to see in the gym. So by no means am I discounting Frankie Edgar. He has a wrestling pedigree that is a key to victory in this fight, to say the very, very least, and someone that has an unbelievable pace. The only question is, when does Frankie Edgar show up and he's those many steps slower and doesn't have the same pop on his takedown and is not able to just execute the kind of fight that he wants to install. So those are all the big questions going into this fight. It's for Marlon Vera, it's a big name for him to establish himself. He fought 3 times last year. He's coming off a decision win over Davey Grant. So this could certainly represent a major victory for Marlon Vera. And that is the main card. A few highlights on the undercard. Alex Pereira is making his UFC debut. Now, Pereira is a former kickboxer who was multiple-time champion in glory at both middleweight and light heavyweight, and the fights that most are going to focus on are the 2 wins he holds over current UFC middleweight champion Israel Adesanya by decision and by knockout back in 2016-2017. Yes, kickboxing fights, but nonetheless a history that he is bringing in to the UFC. He is taking on Andreas Mihalidis, who is 13-4 and coming off a win over KB Buller back in May. With Pereira, I think that for him, certainly, if he looks spectacular here, he is going to be fast-tracked. That does not mean fighting for a championship next, obviously. He has a road ahead of him. But I think it will give him the nod over the pack. If this guy comes in and he looks great in a couple of fights, you have a backstory. It's not like Israel Adesanya has the longest list of contenders at 185 pounds once you get out of Robert Whittaker. I mean, this guy has gone through this division that it is... The time is now for Pereira, who's 34 years of age. So that it's a little high. Again, like we said, when you're hitting that mid-30s number, it's time. Like you gotta really... Like, I would honestly, like, if you're looking at Pereira here, come in, look as dominant as possible, and boom, turn around quick, rack up some wins, because this guy could find himself in that title hunt. But it's asking a lot of a fighter that is 3-1 in MMA. So, but nonetheless, it's the featured prelim fight, and that's the reason. That is the reason. If it becomes a showcase for the former kickboxer. Bobby Green's taking on Ally Quinta. That should be a very intriguing fight. Green had a ridiculous schedule last year. He fought 4 times from June until October, and then took some time off and came back in August against Rafael Fizev. And this dude, 10 straight decisions since April of 2017. So, I mean, the odds would be we're getting a full 3 here. Iaquinta has not competed in 2 years. So, where is he now? 34 years of age, somebody that has fought major names at 155 pounds, and will be looking to do so here against Bobby Green. And the rest of the card, it's a 14 fight card. We've got Phil Hawes taking on Chris Curtis, Nasruddin Imovov versus Edmund Shabazian. Shabazian all of a sudden coming off a pair of losses, so kind of important for him down here on the prelims. Ian Gary making his UFC debut, coming over from Cage Warriors, will take on Jordan Williams. And the early prelims see Chris Barnett versus John Vellante at heavyweight, John Allen versus Dustin Jacoby, Bruno Souza versus Melsik Bogdasarian, and opening things up will be O'Day Osborne against CJ Vergara. So there you go. That is your UFC 268 card. On Saturday night, as soon as the pay-per-view ends, myself and Phil Chair Talk will be live on this channel at youtube.com/postwrestling. So please give the channel a subscribe, like this video, circulate however you must, and then join us live Saturday night. You'll get the alert if you are subscribed. When we are going live, it'll be minutes after the main event, where we will have a full rundown of the card. Prior to that, I will alert all of you that we will be back with myself and Brandon Thurston on Friday, and then Friday night, Rewind to SmackDown will be live for all members of the Post Wrestling Cafe, with Wei Ting and Kate from Montreal going through SmackDown and AEW Rampage. And thank you to everybody that has been checking out these daily post-news updates. They've been fun to do. The reception has been very strong. They will be free here on the YouTube channel, and then in audio form, if you want to listen, you have to be a subscriber at postwrestlingcafe.com. That is all from me. Tonight, Martin Bushby will have an interview with Rev Pro promoter Andy Quilden, a whole retrospective on his career, which I think will be a very insightful chat. So look out for that at postwrestling.com on the British Wrestling Experience feed. That is it. Thank you, everybody, for listening.